excited to have you back today. Today I am down at the beach here on Lake Erie, and off in the distance you'll see Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm excited to demonstrate this for you today, this beautiful shoreline and the trees and just these values as they go back. So stay tuned and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. All right, so I'll see you on the other side. My setup today has an umbrella clipped to the back of my tripod. I have an open box M easel clipped to a regular tripod with a 9x12 canvas. Colors I am using today: alizarin crimson or permanent, phthalo green, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow pale, and cadmium yellow medium, and titanium white. Okay, so I'm going to begin with just a thumbnail sketch indicating my basic canvas size here. This is a 9x12, and I really like this intense foreshortening that I have here, in the way that this beach comes and just quickly disappears this way and then vanishes again around this area. So I'm going to work on just all of these values and atmosphere changes in here. And Cleveland, Ohio is way back there. So I'll just let that go back. And if I don't like this initial idea, I can come up with a few more sketches. So this foliage comes down like this. The water has this really great shadow in it right here. So I may make this all smaller, but we've got some shadows on the sand over here. There's this nice vignette of darker blue in the water here. So we'll go with that. I like that better. And then I can squeeze Cleveland in way over here. And that nice stepping of values, I'm going to work that out on canvas. Okay, so I'm going to set this here and just loosely sort of decide where I want things to be. All right, well, there are a lot of people on the beach, and so I decided to do a voiceover with this video. I just thought it would be easier than trying to talk while there's people milling around. Anyway, so I have my thumbnail sketch sitting next to me, and what I do from this point is I have a thinned down mixture of the values that I'm going to be using, and this is a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, more on the blue side. Because I do want to sort of push that feeling of atmosphere and distance in this picture. So as I'm working on these values up front, I'm working on getting the darker tones established as I work my way back towards the background to make that a little lighter back there. So I'm just sort of massing out. Painting is a lot more like sculpture than it is like drawing. And instead of just taking a pencil to my canvas, I'm already thinking in terms of mass. And these trees, they have a sense of bulk and weight, and so I really want to capture that feeling, that sense. So what I'm doing here is, even though it's a thinned down mixture, I'm just laying it on fairly thin of ultramarine blue, a little bit of phthalo green in the shadows where I want a cooler green, a little yellow ochre, and some cadmiums. I have different piles mixed up so I can just reach down and grab what color seems appropriate. Now in this photo off to the left, obviously photographs, even if, and actually a video, I have it in slow motion, it will still wash out the values. The sky had, it was a little bit darker towards the horizon, but the whites in a photo get really white and the shadows or darks get almost black. So that's one of the reasons that I encourage people to plein air, because it helps you really perfect and hone your understanding of color. Working solely from photos, you do not get a firm grasp of the subtleties and color changes in shadows as well as light, because photos can distort. They don't just distort the drawing, they distort all kinds of things, including, and most importantly, color and values. Okay, so I'm just blocking in a little bit more of the values. Again, this is just still a thin mixture. I am using a little bit more of the linseed oil at this point. I'm not using the Gamsol except to clean my brush. I'm sorry about that flash. I am not sure what that is. I have no idea. I hope that you're not seeing it, seeing it here as I'm editing this. Anyway, so I have a light lavender mixture of, it's ultramarine blue, a little bit of alizarin permanent, and some white. And that gives you a nice purple, but I sort of tone that purple down with a little bit of yellow ochre or burnt sienna, and it helps to just make it less vibrant purple and a little bit more of that dusty lavender color. So now I'm establishing the value of the water right at the shoreline. It's got kind of a nice dark ochre and a subtle greenish brown in there. And that has a nice edge as it draws the eye in. I don't want to draw the viewer directly down into the corner, so I'm thinking about how I want that to curve. And I love that the rocks were in that lower right-hand corner. That helps to create a softer edge as it comes off the canvas, instead of a sharp, abrupt shoreline straight down into the corner. So if you can arrange things like that, you don't have to be 100% true to nature. This beach obviously was a little bit longer, so I shortened it and then put the rocks in the corner because I really needed that compositional entry of the rocks. So that's sort of what I'm establishing here, as I'm just laying out the foundation of where I'm going to go with this painting. And of course, right down nearer to me, the water was a little more transparent. It was less of the darker value. So I had a little bit more of the yellow ochre and green up close to me, which was just a beautiful transition as that color moved back into the distance and got less and less vibrant as it got away from me. Remember, anything up close to you is going to be stronger color, stronger contrast, more warmth. By warmth, I mean more of the yellow-orange family. As it moves farther away, we lose those colors out of our visual spectrum, and what's replaced is just more of the blues as it goes away. And one way I like to tell people to remember that as you're working on distance is there's just simply more sky in between you and the background. So you can just add a lighter shade of blue over your distance to create that illusion. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking this bluish gray mixture. It's still pretty thin, and I'm just rubbing it into the canvas where I see it. And there's you can see as the dark shadow on the shoreline contrasts with a light passage of the sky, and I do push that a little bit lighter. It just has a really nice contrast and lead in that way too. But there's this vignette of darker towards the foreground there that is really nice too. It sort of helps frame the image in the focal area, which is, you know, the shoreline and the rocks and the trees back further back. All right, so here I am taking a little bit more white into that mixture of water. And I'm laying it down. If you notice, my brush strokes I keep horizontal to convey the feeling of water. And what I was referring to a little bit ago with the white on the shore, how it just has that nice contrast with the dark of the shadows, trying to play with that and push that up a little bit more so that you can see that just really nice transition there. So I'm working on the background where the distant land kind of touches over there where Cleveland is. It's a weird color when you look at it in nature. It's not really lavender. It's sort of a dirty lavender color. And of course, the sky there was a lot darker than what you could see in the photo. So that's a little bit of the white with the blue. A little bit of burnt sienna will tone it down and make it grayer. So again, keeping my brush strokes horizontal. I like the effect where the sky meets the water and it's hard to see where one starts and the other stops. I think that has a nice feeling of distance too. One thing I'm always looking for, whether it's in nature or if I'm working on a still life or whatever, is I like to find passages where there's movement of value and movement of color. So the sky today had this really beautiful, sort of these cobalt blue passages where the sky just peeked through the clouds, and it's really hard to tell from the photo on the left, but towards the top of the trees and the sky as it went above, there was a little bit more of an ultramarine blue color to the blue. But as it went down toward the horizon, the sky blue color turned warmer, a little bit more, added a smallest touch of phthalo green and more white, and it had a really nice warmth to it. So that color movement through the sky created a sense, even through the clouds and the haze, that there was movement of the earth and the sky is just sort of like a dome overhead. And then the passage with the clouds, there were parts that were brighter, lighter, more of the sun was filtering through, and then other places where it was darker. So I look for those areas where I can play with that gradation in the values as well as the colors. It just adds another layer of beauty to your paintings. I've heard it said that you shouldn't go more than 2 inches with a brush stroke or color or whatever without some sort of change, whether it's in color or value, just an alteration like that. Makes it more interesting. And now these clouds that I'm working on here, just again, keeping my brush strokes in line with the direction that I want the movement of the clouds to go in. The wind was sort of blowing that general direction, and I wanted them to appear soft because those were higher in the stratosphere. And so clouds higher up are smoother, a little more wispy, but the ones that are lower, altostratus, whatever they are, they have sort of a chunkier feeling, and you can't see them in this photo, but there were some lower lying puffy clouds that I do add because it gives a nice mixture. Not all skies are just straight blue or just cloudy, but there are mixed skies, and those are really fun to paint. So to indicate the puffier lower clouds, I started with, again, that light dusty lavender, and it was very, very light, and I'm indicating the bottom of the clouds just to sort of map out where I'm going to be putting them. The further away down the horizon, the smaller and more horizontal the lines get, closer together. But up close, they're sort of chunkier, a little bit darker, and you can sort of play with them, the colors and the values a little bit more in the clouds up close. So just laying down little chunks and pieces of paint for those puffier clouds, just layered on top. I just go right over the top of the background sky that I just painted. Okay, so I'm working on Cleveland back there, and when I see these two side by side, the photo and the painting, you can see all kinds of differences, but when you're out there in the field and you're squinting, you're trying to get the city and the wind is blowing your easel, it just makes it a little bit difficult to try to get it exact. But sometimes with buildings, especially when they're so far away, you just have to suggest a few little vertical lines and maybe some squares, and that's really enough. Just remember, the further away you get, sometimes the values are lighter. Sometimes you can stare at something. If I just stared at those buildings, suddenly they start to feel a little bit darker but you always have to compare them to another passage in the painting that's even darker still to really gauge the value difference. So especially that shoreline there as it comes in front of the city was a little darker, and that helped to just really push the city a little further back. So I'm working on now this lighter, almost minty celery green for these distant trees. I wanted to just sort of play with the colors of the sunlight first. And sometimes when you get to an area, you don't always have the freedom to work in the order that you're used to working in for your plein air experience. You have to grab the color notes and the value notes as you see them. So in this photo off to the left, you don't really see the intensity that I saw when I was there. So as I was painting, the sun had come out again and just filtered through the trees like that, and I caught it at that moment. So you'll see in this video, sometimes I jump around doing some other things because you really have to capture those moments when you can. That's one of the challenges of working in plein air. Light changes, atmosphere, you could get complete cloud cover and you have no sunlight. So you grab it while you have the opportunity, even if it's not in your exact order that you like to go in, because you don't know if it's going to come back. Sometimes I do take a photograph before I start to help me, just to have that as reference in case I need it. One thing I do implore you to not do, and I see many people do this, is they'll go to the scene, take a picture of it, and instead of using nature as reference, they'll just look at their camera picture on their phone and paint from that. And I don't understand that. You're out plein air painting, look at nature, put your phone down. That photo is really just so that if you go back home and you wanted to touch up some things, you kind of have a suggested reference for what it did look like. Again, as I've tried to drive home the point, the colors and values in your photo are not going to accurately represent what they were in nature. So do your best to just take your time, relax, capture what you can, and what you don't capture, there's another day for it. You don't have to get it all in one day. And if things change too much, just, turn around, paint a different scene, or, plan on another outing. But what I think what people may not understand in these videos is that I speed it up 50% most of the time, unless I'm talking through the video, then it's not sped up. But these are about 50% speed. So that's why I don't paint this fast, obviously. So at this point now, I wanted to zoom in and show you some of those cooler greens that I put as the shadow slopes down the hill, and some darker accents through the trees. Beautiful cadmium yellows in the blues, and then a little bit of that phthalo green into the cad yellow with white to create that sunlight green. Lovely shades of green you can get with just this very limited palette. So the phthalo green and blue and a little white, little yellow ochre gives you that cool blue-green shadow down the hill. As the trees and bushes start to turn a little bit, they turn a little bit more olive green, so I add a little bit more cadmium yellow and yellow ochre, less of the phthalo green. That phthalo green is only to cool things down. So now the sunlight, just a little bit more of the cadmium yellow to get that. So these tree trunks are actually just a nice gray, and I have to be very careful to create an interesting shape to them. You don't want to just go straight down, but I just sort of juggled my brush a little bit this way, a little bit that, to give it some character. And then they get much smaller as they go back. In some places where there was a lighter background behind the tree trunk was a little darker just because it was silhouetted. Now I'm coming along to the shoreline and just cleaning it up where the trees meet the sand, and then way in the distance, lighter, that's almost a light peach way back there. As we come closer to us, I add more of the cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, a little bit of the alizarin permanent just to create some of that orangey tone as we're up close. Sand is very gray, so I want to make sure that I don't overcolor it. You can see even just back there, it's very gray, and I see a lot of people using a little bit too much burnt sienna yellow ochre to create a brown, depending on what beach you're on. And I've been to a lot of beaches, and they're very And just keep in mind adding more gray and lavenders to the shadows. So these trees, as they're casting down their shadows on the beach, they have a really nice dusty lavender. That's the blue, alizarin, white, with a little yellow ochre into it. And of course they changed throughout the time I was painting, but you just have to select the ones that are best going to represent what you're doing. So I'm going back through now and adding these rocky, rocky things going up. Again, just paying attention to the value differences between each. If I stare at that one in behind, it can seem really dark. Our eyes can deceive us, but you have to compare. So I'm comparing that rocky prominence to the one in front of it, and I'm just gauging that there's a slight step back in values. I also don't want to make it a straight line going off the canvas, so I broke up those rocks a little bit. In reality, they were a solid line, but a solid line like that has a tendency to cut your picture, and you don't want vertical lines just jutting straight off. Compositionally, you don't want to do that. So I'm making this rocky passage as interesting as I can. Little rocks going this way, letting my brush strokes convey the feeling of rocks. Now in the foreground here, where the rocks touch the surface of the water, over there in reality, and you can't really tell in this picture, but where they met the water, there was a nice transition from the rocks down into the water that had a nice connection. And so that darker value I used along the shoreline where there was the shadow from the reflection in the water created a little darker tone along the beach, the wet sand area as well. So I'm putting that down, and I'm noticing the subtle changes in color. Obviously in a photo, it looks very dark just all the way across. But in reality, there were some passages where that dark wet sand was a little bit more yellow ochre. And I thought that was a really beautiful transition, another color movement in the water that I was talking about in the sky. So there was a lot of that subtlety as it went from sort of a dark olive green to a yellow ochre green under the surface of the water and a little bit on the wet packed sand. So I'm just playing with that a little in here. Again, I apologize for the movement of my canvas. The wind was blowing and my umbrella was jerking me around. So my other hand is holding down my easel while I'm painting. And it's just really exciting out there plein air painting. You just never know what you're going to get. Thankfully, the wind did not blow everything over, which has happened before too. It's always exciting. I'm giving the rocks a little bit of information, just a little bit more detail, just because I'm there, and it just had an interesting feeling. Very light, suggested tone on the tops of the rocks. And then as we're coming down into the water, if you notice, I'm keeping my brush strokes a little shorter, a little choppier, just because it gives that feeling of water and the ripples in the water. And I'm adding a little bit of the white along the shoreline. As the water was coming, the waves were almost nothing, so there was just a very subtle sort of splash up on the shore. And what you want to do is just make sure that when you're painting water meeting the shoreline that you give it an interesting contour. every time I look at the water meeting the sand, it's a different shape. And so you just have to select what is an interesting shape for that passage where the water meets the sand. And that's just what I'm working on here, just adding a little bit more of the ripples in the water and some of the highlights. And to work on these rocks, I started with the ones that are under the surface of the water, and they really represented a little bit more of a sort of a yellow ochre color you can see in the picture here. Yellow ochre, some white, and then the ones on the actual sand were a little bit lighter, but I started with their shadows, and then I can sculpt out of those shadows some of the lighter to middle tone ranges to indicate a drier rock. And just a few highlights on some of these rocks, and then that passage is, to my satisfaction, complete. I feel that the objective that I was looking for with allowing the rocks to be a compositional entry, and then just a visual interest too, was finished. That's all I needed. Now just to add a few of the ripples in the water, I noticed around the rocks there was a little bit more of the splashing and the curves in the ripples. And I want to be careful not to lose the rocks that are under the water, but by putting these waves now over the rocks really pushes them under the surface, which is pretty cool. So just adding a few more ripples. I wanted to indicate to the direction that those waves were coming in the shore. I thought that that created a nice sense of movement, drawing the viewer in directly to my focal area, which is like the trees and the shore and the rocks in that passage. And then, of course, just a little bit in there, and that's what I'm doing here, just a little bit of those ripples indicating that movement. And just a few sparkles, and that's really all I felt I needed for the water. Now, all that's left for the entire painting is just a few more little details that I felt I needed to put in just to make it all sort of stand out. Just like I painted last week the tree video, when you add people to a scene, it just sort of changes everything, and it makes it just have a sense of life. And so I added a few people in here. It also gave the feeling of space and dimension. So up close I have two figures on the beach, which I typically paint as though they're a carrot. If they're far enough away, I can just do a carrot with a little head on it, and maybe a leg, if it's stepping or whatever. And then as they go further back, they're an even smaller carrot, just tiny little, and that's all you need. And it just has such an interesting effect on our psychology of just the life in a painting. And that pretty much wraps this up. I want to invite you to stay watching. At the end, I show you a short 3-minute video of my upcoming online workshop. I think you're going to like what you see, and be sure to check out the links below. Thank you everybody for watching, and I hope that you have a wonderful week. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. All right, everybody, well, that wraps this up. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you enjoy this and go ahead and try to get out and do a little bit of plein air while we still have some nice weather. All right, everybody, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Jessica Henry Gray and I'm excited to come on here today to talk to you about a workshop that I have coming up in October. And this will be the last workshop I have for this year, 2021. This workshop I have coming up is designed to get you prepared for plein air painting. So the way that it works is I have 4 sessions in this workshop. They are every Tuesday, and the design is that it is a Zoom workshop. However, we've put together sort of a hybrid workshop. In this workshop, Preparing for Plein Air, we are combining the best of live Zoom interactive sessions with a pre-recorded high-definition demo. A week before each session, I will send you a link to a demonstration lasting about an hour. This is really the most effective way to show you my methods of painting, and they will be the high-quality videos that you are used to seeing on my YouTube channel. Compared to live demos or even Zoom, where your view may be limited or blocked by other students, sending out a pre-recorded video is truly the best way to watch a demo. So we send that out ahead, and then you are able to watch it on your own free time, allowing you the freedom to start and stop and rewatch and take notes and just practice along with during the course of the video. And then we meet at our appointed Zoom meeting times for 2 hours to discuss the workshop, to talk about your painting, or to have me just be there with you as you go through the lesson and paint the project in the video. Working at your own pace is the most comfortable way, and we've heard wonderful response from people who have been taking our Zoom videos doing it this way. I will be teaching the fundamentals of plein air painting. In my videos that I send, I will be actually out in the field demonstrating how to set up equipment, what's the best equipment to use, how to be efficient, how to select a place and choose your composition based on what you see before you. I also will be teaching you about color mixing and how to mix colors to more accurately represent what it is you're seeing. I will teach about painting different elements of nature between water and colored trees, greens and blues. And I'm sure we will get some beautiful fall colors because this workshop is in October. So I will give you a lot more information on my website. I encourage you to take a look and check it out. I think you're going to really enjoy these hybrid workshops that I'm putting together for Zoom. We're getting a lot of really positive feedback from ones that we've done before, and I hope to see you sometime at one of them coming up. All right, thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you later.